Hello everyone. Here is the story. HOA ordered my power disconnected over a fake violation. They picked the wrong house. Please listen along, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts. We truly appreciate all feedback as it helps the channel grow and improve. Also, feel free to share a little about where you live, your age, and your interests. We are incredibly grateful for your support. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's get started. Hello everyone. Here is the story. HOA ordered my power disconnected over a fake violation. They picked the wrong house. Please listen along, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts. We truly appreciate all feedback as it helps the channel grow and improve. Also, feel free to share a little about where you live, your age, and your interests. We are incredibly grateful for your support. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's get started. The moment my house went silent, I knew someone had lied. At 6:12 on a Tuesday morning, the air conditioner coughed once and died. The ceiling fan above our kitchen table slowed until each blade became visible, then stopped completely. The coffee maker clicked off halfway through its cycle, leaving the sharp smell of unfinished coffee hanging in the warm Arizona air. For 1 second, I heard nothing. No refrigerator hum, no ventilation fan, no faint electrical buzz behind the walls. A modern house is never truly quiet until someone takes its power away. Then came the metallic clunk from the side yard. I set down my mug and crossed the tile floor barefoot, feeling the house heat up around me faster than it should have. Outside, the morning sun was already bleaching the roofs of Copper Ridge Estate's pale gold. The gravel along my foundation pressed into my feet as I rounded the garage and found a utility technician locking a red seal across my meter box. Service disconnected, electrical hazard. The warning label looked official from 10 feet away. Up close, the ink was too dark, the plastic too brittle, and the serial number belonged to a batch the county had retired 2 years earlier. I knew because I had helped review the failure reports. Across the street, Cindy Holbrook stood beside her white Lexus with a red folder tucked under one arm. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but not the smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. "Maybe now you'll take community safety seriously," she called. The technician stared at the ground. He looked uncomfortable, which told me more than anything he could have said. I took out my phone and photographed the seal, the meter, his truck number, and the time displayed on my screen. 6:12 a.m. Cindy expected an argument. She wanted me shouting in the street while neighbors watched through blinds. I gave her nothing. I walked back inside and opened the monitoring cabinet in my garage. A green status light blinked 3 times. The automatic transfer switch had moved the house onto battery power exactly as designed. On the small display, white numbers counted down beneath the words estimated backup. 5 hours, 47 minutes. My wife, Laura, stood in the doorway holding her phone. "Can they do this?" she asked. "Not legally," I said. The battery inverter gave off its steady low hum, calm and mechanical. Then my laptop chimed. The house had already uploaded its meter logs, camera footage, voltage records, and disconnect timestamp to the external server used by the city's residential grid pilot program. Cindy thought she had shut down my home with a fake violation and an official-looking sticker. What she did not know was that this house had been built to document every interruption, every open panel, and every unauthorized hand that touched the system. I looked through the garage window. Cindy was still smiling. I turned back to the screen and opened the first data file. She had picked the wrong house. 6 months earlier, that same garage smelled like sawdust, warm copper, and the black coffee my father used to drink from a dented steel thermos. His name was Daniel Mercer, and he spent 31 years repairing power lines across central Arizona. He could listen to a transformer from across a parking lot and tell whether the problem was heat, moisture, or a loose connection. When I was 10, he taught me how to strip wire without damaging the copper. When I was 16, he let me help replace the service panel in this house. He wrote one sentence inside the metal door with a carpenter pencil. "Trace the fault. Do not guess." The handwriting was still there when Laura and I inherited the place after he died. I never painted over it. I am Ethan Mercer. I was 44 years old that summer, and I had spent most of my career studying electrical failures before they became emergencies. I worked for a regional utility, then left to start a small inspection company that handled commercial systems, residential upgrades, and insurance investigations. Most people saw a breaker box as a gray metal cabinet. I saw a timeline. Heat discoloration, Tool marks, voltage drops, and digital records all told a story if you knew how to read them. The house became part of a city resilience program after 2 summer storms knocked out power across the county. The program needed ordinary homes with upgraded systems that could record what happened before, during, and after an outage. I volunteered hours. Every permit was approved. Every circuit was inspected. A battery system sat against the garage wall, connected to an automatic transfer switch and a smart meter that logged changes down to the second. The equipment was not flashy. It was practical, quiet, and built to keep the refrigerator cold and the air conditioner running long enough for the grid to recover. My 16-year-old son, Caleb, helped me install the monitoring sensors. He held the flashlight while I labeled cables and complained that my handwriting looked like something carved into an old fence post. When we finished, he tapped the green status light and asked whether the system could tell if someone opened the meter enclosure. I told him it could record the exact time, the voltage change, and whether the interruption came from the utility side or inside the house. He smiled and said the house sounded like a witness. I remember laughing at that. At the time, Copper Ridge Estates felt quiet enough that we would never need one. The streets curved through rows of stucco homes, trimmed mesquite trees, and gravel yards designed to survive the desert heat. Sprinklers clicked before sunrise. Garage doors opened at the same hour every morning. People waved without slowing down. Laura liked the school district. Caleb liked having enough garage space for his bicycle projects. I liked that the old workbench still carried scratches from my father's tools. We had rebuilt the house without erasing him. I believed the permits, inspections, and county approvals made everything secure. I believed facts would be enough. Then Cindy Hallbrook saw the equipment mounted beside my garage, and she decided that my father's house needed her permission to exist. Cindy Hallbrook first approached me on a Thursday afternoon while I was labeling the final inspection photos in the garage. I heard the soft crunch of tires on gravel, then the sharp click of expensive heels crossing the driveway. Her white Lexus sat at the curb with the engine running, polished so clean it reflected the pale Arizona sky. Cindy carried a red folder under one arm and wore a cream-colored suit that looked completely wrong for the heat. Her perfume reached me before her voice did, floral and heavy enough to cover the smell of warm insulation and machine oil. She stopped beside the battery cabinet and stared at it like I had installed a refinery against the house. "This equipment was not approved by the architectural committee," she said. I wiped my hands on a shop towel and pointed to the permit packet clipped above the workbench. The city approved it. The utility approved it. The county fire inspector signed off yesterday. Cindy did not look at the papers. She ran one finger along the edge of the red folder instead. City approval does not replace community approval. Her tone was calm, almost friendly, but the words carried the weight of a threat wrapped in polite language. I explained that the system sat behind the side gate, could not be seen from the street, and met every electrical and fire code that applied to the property. She tilted her head and gave me the kind of smile people use when they have already decided the answer does not matter. Then she opened the folder and handed me a glossy estimate from Hallbrook Electrical Solutions. The company name was printed in dark blue across the top. The recommended package included a new service panel, a different battery enclosure, decorative screening, and what it called community compliance monitoring. The total was $12,800. "This contractor understands our standards," Cindy said. "They have corrected several similar situations." I studied the estimate. The equipment listed was cheaper than what I had installed, the labor hours were inflated, and the monitoring fee continued every month. At the bottom, the company contact was listed as Gregory Hallbrook. I asked whether he was related to her. Cindy closed the folder before I could read the rest. "My brother-in-law is a respected licensed contractor." That answered the real question. I told her I would not replace a safe, permitted system with inferior equipment to satisfy an unofficial preference. The air between us seemed to tighten. Somewhere across the street, a sprinkler clicked through dry grass. Cindy looked past me toward the old service panel where my father had written his note in pencil. People who resist reasonable standards usually discover that compliance becomes more expensive later. She left the estimate on my workbench and walked back to her Lexus without another word. The next morning, a violation notice was taped to my front door. Unauthorized commercial electrical equipment. $250 fine. 3 days to correct. I placed the notice beside the city permit and photographed both. The paper smelled like fresh toner. By the end of the week, a second notice arrived. Then a third. Each one used the same phrase: immediate electrical danger. That wording bothered me. It was too specific, too deliberate. Cindy was not trying to enforce a rule. She was building a paper trail that would let her skip the rules entirely. The first fine was $250. The second was $1,000. By the third week, Cindy had added inspection fees, administrative penalties, emergency review costs, and daily non-compliance charges until the total reached $4,000. Every envelope carried the same sweet chemical smell from the toner in the Homeowners Association office printer. Every letter used the same phrase: immediate electrical danger. I answered each one with copies of permits, inspection reports, equipment specifications, and photographs showing the system behind a locked side gate. Cindy answered with silence, then another fine. She also started working the neighborhood. Mrs. Alvarez stopped Laura near the community mailbox and asked whether our battery could explode in the heat. A father from Caleb's school refused to let his son work on a bicycle in our garage because he had heard we were storing industrial equipment. At the grocery store, Laura overheard two women discussing the dangerous house on Juniper Lane. Cindy had turned a permitted electrical system into a neighborhood ghost story. The pressure followed Laura into her classroom when a parent asked whether she should be teaching science while her own home violated safety codes. She came home that evening with her jaw tight and her car keys clenched in one hand. I wanted to march straight to Cindy's door. Instead, I opened another file and documented the date, time, and exact words. My father had taught me that anger makes people skip steps. Cindy was counting on that. I requested a formal hearing before the Homeowners Association board. The meeting room smelled like lemon cleaner and burnt coffee. Cindy sat beneath a framed photograph of Copper Ridge Estates, her red folder centered in front of her like a judge's bench. She told the board that my equipment placed 186 homes at risk. Then she held up a 3-page report bearing the county seal. According to her, an electrical inspector had identified improper energy storage, unauthorized grid interaction, and a serious fire hazard. I asked for the inspector's name. Cindy said the report was confidential. I asked for the inspection date. She said the board was not required to debate technical details with a homeowner in violation. I asked why no inspector had entered my property. Her smile hardened. Emergency findings do not require your cooperation. The board voted to increase my balance to $18,600 and authorized immediate corrective action. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived stating that electrical service could be suspended until the hazard was removed. I called the county office before the ink had finished staining my fingers. The receptionist found no open case under my address, but she warned me that emergency utility orders sometimes appeared in a separate system. I sent a written request for confirmation and copied the power company. No one answered that day. At 5:40 the next morning, I woke to the faint hiss of sprinklers outside and saw a utility truck parked beneath the streetlight. Cindy's white Lexus waited half a block behind it. She had not come to inspect anything. She had come to watch. At 6:12, the metallic clunk traveled through the wall, the air conditioner stopped, and every ordinary sound inside my father's house disappeared. For the first hour, the house behaved exactly as it had been designed to behave. The battery inverter carried the refrigerator, the kitchen lights, the internet router, and one air conditioning zone, while the display counted down from 5 hours and 47 minutes. Laura moved food into the garage freezer because it used less power. Caleb shut off every unnecessary circuit and stood beside me with a legal pad, writing down times as I called them out. Outside, the desert sun climbed over the tile roofs, turning the stucco walls bright enough to hurt my eyes. Cindy remained across the street long enough to see the lights stay on. Her smile disappeared when she realized we had backup power. Then she climbed into her Lexus and drove away. I called the utility company at 7 o'clock. The representative told me their system showed a valid emergency disconnect order submitted by the County Electrical Inspection Office. She could not restore service until the Homeowners Association confirmed that the hazard had been corrected. I asked why a private neighborhood board controlled the return of public utility service. Her voice became careful. That is how the order was entered, sir. The county office gave me a different version. They had no active inspection under my address, but their records department said a digitally signed emergency notice had appeared in the utility portal at 6:29 that morning. I looked at the clock on my screen. The power had been cut at 6:12, 17 minutes before the order existed. I asked for a copy. They refused while the matter was under review. By 9 o'clock, I had spoken with 3 departments and received 4 versions of the same answer. The paperwork looked official, so everyone treated it as official. A local attorney I had used for business contracts stopped by before lunch. He reviewed the notices at our kitchen table while warm air gathered near the ceiling. The smell of melting ice drifted from a cooler beside Laura's chair. He told me the fastest solution was to pay the $18,600, hire Hallbrook Electrical Solutions, and sue later. You might win, he said, but the house needs power now. I watched Cindy's red folder through the window of my memory and understood exactly what she expected. She had built a system where surrender looked cheaper than resistance. At 11:45, an email from the Homeowners Association announced an emergency community meeting for that evening. The subject line declared that the electrical threat on Juniper Lane had been contained. Cindy wrote that the homeowner had failed to provide acceptable proof of compliance and that decisive action had protected the neighborhood. She was celebrating before the battery had even gone dark. At 11:56, I finished uploading the last camera files and meter logs to 3 separate locations. At 11:59, the inverter gave one low tone. The green light turned amber, then red. The air conditioner stopped. The refrigerator fell silent. Heat settled over the kitchen like a heavy blanket. Caleb looked at me and asked what we were going to do next. I closed the laptop and listened to the complete silence Cindy had worked so hard to create. Now, I said, we stop defending ourselves and start tracing the fault. The garage was already 93 degrees when Caleb and I opened the first data archive. Sweat gathered beneath my collar, and the metal workbench felt warm against my forearms. Without the air conditioner, every sound sharpened. The laptop fan whispered. I shifted inside the cooler. Somewhere, behind the wall, the powerless refrigerator clicked as if it were still trying to wake up. I started with the smart meter record. At 6:08 that morning, the enclosure sensor registered an unauthorized opening. 4 minutes later, at 6:12, incoming voltage dropped from 240 volts to 0. The interruption came from the utility side, not from any breaker or device inside my home. Caleb wrote both times on the legal pad. Then I opened the utility work order. The emergency disconnect request had been created at 6:29. I read the timestamp twice. The electricity had been cut 17 minutes before anyone entered the order that supposedly authorized it. That was not a delayed computer update. The system synchronized automatically with the utility server every 30 seconds. Someone had disconnected the house first and manufactured the justification afterward. I pulled the exterior camera footage from the city server. At 6:03, Cindy's Lexus rolled into view and stopped half a block away. She stepped out carrying the same red folder and walked toward the utility truck before it reached my driveway. At 6:06, she handed something through the passenger window. At 6:08, the technician opened my meter enclosure. The camera did not capture their words clearly, but the garage microphone had recorded a faint section through the side vent. I filtered out the sprinkler hiss and traffic noise. Cindy's voice came through thin but recognizable. The paperwork will catch up later. Caleb stopped writing. The pencil hovered above the page. She actually said that? I played it again. The same sentence drifted from the speakers, followed by the metallic scrape of the enclosure door. Next came the county report Cindy had displayed during the board meeting. I enlarged the digital signature and compared it with public inspection documents from the county archive. The signature belonged to Dana Brooks, a senior electrical inspector, but the image had been lifted from a report issued 11 months earlier for a restaurant renovation 8 miles away. The compression marks were identical. Even the pale gray line from the old document remained beneath the copied name. I called Dana directly. She answered from a job site, with wind and machinery rumbling behind her. When I described the report, her voice went still. She asked me to send everything immediately and told me she had never inspected my house, signed an order against it, or authorized anyone to use her credentials. Before ending the call, she said one sentence that cooled the heat in the garage better than any air conditioner could have. Do not contact the Homeowners Association again until I preserve the county records. By 3 o'clock, I had 5 independent sources telling the same story. The meter sensor, the voltage log, the utility timestamp, the camera footage, and the copied signature. Cindy had treated my electrical system like something she could silence with a sticker and a phone call. She had forgotten that electricity leaves a trail measured in seconds. I looked at my father's pencil marks inside the service panel. Trace the fault. Do not guess. For the first time that day, I was no longer guessing. By late afternoon, Dana Brooks had placed a preservation hold on the county records, and I had called Rachel Kim, an attorney who specialized in property rights and public utilities. She arrived just after sunset carrying a canvas briefcase and 2 bottles of cold water. The house was still hot enough to make the leather chairs feel damp. Laura opened the back door to let in what little desert air remained, while Caleb moved a battery lantern to the kitchen table. Rachel listened without interrupting as I walked her through the timestamps, the copied signature, and Cindy's recorded sentence. When I finished, she did not look surprised. She looked interested. People rarely forge an emergency order for one argument, she said. They do it because the system has worked before. That sentence shifted the entire room. We stopped looking only at my house. Rachel searched county filings while I reviewed homeowners association meeting records going back 3 years. The same phrase appeared again and again: immediate electrical danger. 11 addresses, then 14. Each case ended with a homeowner hiring Holbrook Electrical Solutions for an expensive correction. Some replaced service panels less than 5 years old. Others paid for decorative enclosures and monthly monitoring plans that had no requirement under city code. The prices ranged from $9,000 to nearly $16,000. At 9:30, someone knocked softly on the front door. Frank Delaney, the Homeowners Association treasurer, stood beneath the porch light with sweat darkening the collar of his blue shirt. He kept glancing toward the street as if Cindy's Lexus might appear from the shadows. Frank had served on the board for 6 years and rarely spoke during meetings. That night, he carried a cardboard file box against his chest. "I should have brought this sooner," he said. The box smelled like dust, old paper, and the peppermint candies he always kept in his pocket. Inside were invoices, canceled checks, meeting drafts, and copies of contracts Cindy had instructed him to remove from the official archive. Holbrook Electrical Solutions paid a consulting fee to a company called Copper Ridge Community Strategies. The address belonged to a private mailbox. The owner was Cynthia Holbrook. Every forced electrical upgrade sent money back to her. Frank showed us handwritten notes from a board meeting where Cindy proposed a mandatory safety package for all 186 homes in Copper Ridge Estates. The estimated project value was more than $2 million. My house was supposed to be the public example. If the Homeowners Association could disconnect a licensed electrical inspector with approved equipment, every other resident would pay without resistance. Frank's hands trembled as he placed one final document on the table. It was a list of homeowners Cindy had labeled difficult, elderly, absent, or financially vulnerable. Mrs. Alvarez was on it. So was a retired school custodian who had borrowed against his car to replace a perfectly safe panel. Laura covered her mouth. The low buzz of the battery lantern filled the silence. Cindy had never cared whether my system was dangerous. She needed the neighborhood to believe resistance was dangerous. Rachel closed the file box and looked at me across the table. "This is not an enforcement dispute anymore," she said. I looked at the names, the payments, and the red ink Cindy had used to mark her next targets. We had followed the current from my meter to the utility portal. Now we had followed the money, and both trails ended at the same front door. The next morning, Rachel told me the strongest trap would be the one Cindy believed she had designed herself. I sat at the powerless kitchen table with sweat collecting beneath my shirt and wrote an email that made my hands feel dirtier with every sentence. I told Cindy the heat was becoming difficult for my family. I said I was prepared to pay for the required work, but my attorney needed written confirmation that the Homeowners Association had authority to order electrical service disconnected and keep it off until a homeowner hired an approved contractor. Rachel removed every angry word and left only fear, surrender, and one polite question. Cindy answered 11 minutes later. Her message said the board possessed broad emergency powers over utilities whenever a property threatened community safety. She added that service would remain disconnected until I paid the full balance and signed a contract with Holbrook Electrical Solutions. At the bottom, beneath her electronic signature, she wrote that refusal would result in additional daily charges. Rachel read the message twice, then printed 3 copies. She just documented the coercion herself, she said. I sent a second email asking whether the board had used this process before. I claimed my insurance company wanted proof that I was not being treated differently. Cindy responded with the confidence of someone showing off a trophy cabinet. She attached a spreadsheet containing 14 addresses, the dates each home had received an electrical hazard notice, and the contractor selected for the correction. She had given us a list of victims in her own handwriting. The afternoon heat pressed against the windows. Outside, cicadas buzzed from the mesquite trees, loud and steady like current moving through an overloaded line. I called each homeowner with Rachel beside me. Some were embarrassed. Some were afraid. One retired custodian, named Walter Price, went silent when I explained that the county had no inspection record for his house. He had paid $11,400 after Cindy warned that his service could be disconnected during winter. Mrs. Alvarez admitted she had nearly signed a loan agreement that morning. By sunset, 9 residents had agreed to provide invoices, notices, and bank records. Cindy believed she was isolating me. Instead, she had connected every person she had pressured into one circuit. I sent one final message asking for permission to address the neighborhood at the emergency meeting. I said I wanted to apologize for the disruption and explain how I planned to comply. Cindy approved the request within minutes. She moved the meeting to the community clubhouse and sent a notice to all 186 homes. Her message promised transparency, accountability, and an important lesson about respecting community standards. She wanted an audience. Rachel contacted Dana Brooks, the utility compliance director and a county investigator. Frank agreed to attend with the original contracts. We told Cindy none of that. Just before midnight, I stood in the dark garage and placed copies of the meter log, the forged report, the payment records, and Cindy's emails inside a red folder identical to hers. The cardboard edges felt sharp beneath my fingers. My father's pencil note was barely visible in the lantern light. Trace the fault. Do not guess. Cindy had spent months turning that red folder into a symbol of authority. At the meeting, I was going to open mine and show the entire neighborhood exactly where her power came from. The clubhouse was packed before the meeting began. Folding chairs filled every open space, and people stood along the back wall beneath framed photographs of neighborhood cookouts and holiday parades. The air smelled like burnt coffee, floor wax, and the dry heat people carried in from the parking lot. Cindy sat at the front table with her red folder open beneath the microphone, holding my own red folder across my knees. Frank sat 3 rows behind us with the cardboard file box between his shoes. Dana Brooks waited near the side wall in a plain blue shirt, close enough to hear everything but far enough that Cindy did not recognize her. Rachel stood beside the utility compliance director near the rear exit. At 7 o'clock, Cindy tapped the microphone and let the feedback squeal across the room. She spoke for 15 minutes about safety, responsibility, and the difficult decisions leaders must make. Then she pointed toward me. Mr. Mercer has asked to address the community and accept responsibility for the disruption he caused. Every face turned in my direction. I walked to the front slowly, feeling the red folder flex beneath my fingers. Cindy leaned back with a satisfied smile. Please explain how you intend to correct your hazardous system, she said. I placed the folder on the table and looked at the room. Before I do that, I need to understand one detail. Cindy's smile tightened. I asked her to confirm that the Homeowners Association had ordered my electricity disconnected. She said yes. I asked whether the board had authority to keep it disconnected until I hired Hallbrook Electrical Solutions. She said yes again, louder this time. I asked whether the same process had been used against other homeowners. Cindy lifted her chin. We have enforced these standards consistently. I opened the folder. The first page showed the meter enclosure opening at 6:08. The second showed the power loss at 6:12. The third showed the emergency order created at 6:29. I slid all 3 toward the edge of the table. The electricity was disconnected 17 minutes before the order existed. The room went still. I played the audio recording through the clubhouse speakers. Cindy's voice came through clearly. The paperwork will catch up later. Someone in the back whispered her name. Dana stepped forward and identified herself. She held up the report Cindy had used at the board hearing and explained that the signature was copied from an unrelated inspection. The utility director confirmed that no homeowners association had legal authority to control the restoration of residential service. Rachel placed Cindy's emails beside the microphone, including the message demanding payment and a contract with her brother-in-law's company. Then Frank carried the cardboard box to the front. He removed the hidden contracts, canceled checks, and payment records one by one. The sound of paper against the table seemed louder than Cindy's breathing. Walter Price stood and held up his invoice. Mrs. Alvarez did the same. More residents followed until the room filled with raised documents. Cindy tried to close her folder, but the county investigator stepped beside her and asked her to leave it open. She looked at me as if I had betrayed her. "You ruined this community," she said. I shook my head. "No, I documented what you did to it." Outside, the utility truck turned into the parking lot, and for the first time all evening, Cindy had nothing left to say. The utility truck reached our house at 6 minutes before 6 that evening. By then, the Arizona sky had turned copper above the rooftops, and the heat trapped inside the stucco walls felt thick enough to hold in my hands. Laura opened every window while Caleb stood beside the garage with the old legal pad pressed against his chest. The utility director had already canceled the false order, but the technician still inspected the meter, the service line, and every seal before restoring anything. This time, Dana Brooks watched him work. So did Rachel, Frank, Walter Price, Mrs. Alvarez, and nearly 20 neighbors who had followed us home from the clubhouse. Nobody spoke when the technician removed the brittle red tag. The plastic snapped softly as he placed it inside an evidence bag. I checked my phone. 6:11. 1 minute later, he closed the service disconnect. The same metallic clunk traveled through the garage wall. At exactly 6:12 in the evening, 12 hours after the house had gone silent, the lights above the workbench came alive. The refrigerator hummed from the kitchen. The air conditioner pulled a deep breath and pushed cool air through the vents. The inverter display shifted from red to green, and the familiar electrical vibration returned beneath my fingertips when I touched the service panel. Caleb smiled at the screen. Laura closed her eyes as the first cool air moved across the room. For everyone else, it was only electricity coming back. For me, it sounded like the truth being restored one circuit at a time. The county investigation moved quickly after that night. Cindy was removed as president before the next board meeting. The Homeowners Association froze every contract connected to Hallbrook Electrical Solutions and hired an independent accounting firm to examine 3 years of payments. The review found 14 forced upgrades, altered meeting records, hidden consulting fees, and more than $180,000 transferred through Cindy's private company. Every fine against our family was canceled. The utility issued a written apology and changed its emergency procedures so no private association could ever control residential reconnection again. Walter received a full refund. Mrs. Alvarez never signed the loan papers. Other families came forward with notices they had once been too embarrassed to question. Frank resigned as treasurer, but not before giving investigators every document he had saved. He told me silence had felt easier until he saw our house go dark. A month later, the neighborhood elected a new board in the same clubhouse where Cindy had tried to make an example of me. The first rule they passed required every contract, inspection, and conflict of interest to be available to every homeowner. No secret folders. No private contractors. No emergency authority invented behind closed doors. I kept the false disconnect seal after the investigation released it. It hangs in the garage beside the service panel, directly below the words my father wrote in carpenter pencil years ago, "Trace the fault. Do not guess." Sometimes I still hear that first clunk when the house grows quiet late at night. Cindy believed power came from controlling a switch, a board, and a frightened neighborhood. My father understood it better. Real power leaves a record. She thought she had shut off my electricity. All she really did was turn on the evidence.